Hello and welcome back to Voxterra. You're going to love this one today. I've done a lot of research for you to expose the fossil fuel roots of anti-wind activism. Wind energy is part of a vision put out by the environmental movement that I've seen across my whole lifetime, that we could harness the wind rather than burning fossil fuels or firing up nuclear power plants to create energy. And in the earlier parts of the 2000s, I began to see wind farms springing up in the countryside. To me, they looked bright, shining, like utopian visions out of the 18 or 1900s sci-fi, a hopeful sign that our market system, which has been pumping our biosphere full of carcinogens and greenhouse gases, was finally correcting. Well, what do I mean by correcting? Well, the true cost of a product, something called market externalities, are pushed onto the public at large. So the cost of that disposable cup made out of plastic, petrochemical plastic, or that gallon of gasoline, or that ton of coal, or that nuclear fuel rod does not include those subsequent health hazards, the cancers, the asthmas, the birth defects, the particulate matter that we breathe into our lungs in the case of fossil fuels, or the accumulating concentrations of greenhouse gases that are trapping heat and heating our planet and destabilizing all of our climatic systems along with it. But finally, due to some technological changes, the price came down so dramatically that even with that market failure, wind and solar were still becoming cheaper. But there was another failure in our market that's never been corrected for. That's the aggregation and accumulations of wealth in certain powerful vested industries, chief among them petrochemical fossil fuels, and the reckless elements within those industries to now sway public opinion, fund think tanks, fund public relations campaigns, fund politicians to protect their industry and their form of making money against competitors. So as the 2000s wore on, I began to see signs like SOS, Save Our Skies, or Save Our Shores. Vociferous and intense opposition to wind energy springing up. Anti-wind speakers even seeming to have similar vocal intonations to each other and definitely repeating some of the same talking points. Much of it, to me, I believe, is misinformation, or definitely what we might call lies by omission. Well, it turns out that opposition to renewable energy flows from the same sources that climate change denial does. Some of the same think tanks or public relations groups or lobbying groups. But these ties can be difficult to pin down because not-for-profits may not need to disclose their funding sources, or the funding sources, for lack of a better word, get laundered through different organizations. So looking into this issue for you, I found a slew of articles from 2012 that should have been screaming news at the time, but were just largely ignored or downplayed by our media. Headlines like this one from Checks and Balances. Confidential subversive campaign documents show fossil fuel-funded advocacy groups coordinating with local anti-wind groups. On February 1st and 2nd, at least two prominent advocacy groups connected to fossil fuel interests, American Tradition Institute, ATI, and Committee for a Constructive Tomorrow, CFACT, met in Washington with 32 Not in My Backyard or NIMBY organizations to discuss coordinated subversion campaign to wreck wind energy. Notice the article says at least two, because again, those ties are hard to find and are hidden and denied where possible. Well, at this meeting, there was a confidential memo that was apparently leaked. But before I get to the details of that memo, I want to point out that the memo mentioned another group called ALEC, or the American Legislative Exchange Council. And they are one of a slew of groups that a great journalistic website called Desmog has shown to have received fossil fuel funding, as well as to have promoted climate change denial and now attacks on renewable energy. I cite ALEC specifically because they're somewhat infamous for promoting something called model legislation, meaning where a legislator can just take almost like a blueprint or just a pre-written law and just go forward with that. Very easy for them. Desmog also exposed the ATI, or American Tradition Institute, which has since changed its name to E&E Legal, as also having connections to fossil fuel industry and climate change denial. specifically funding through Atlas Research, which in turn received funding from Koch Foundation and ExxonMobil. Now pause to notice the name American Tradition Institute, aimed at appealing to people who may feel like you feel that our traditions are under attack. But those traditions being under attack have nothing to do with the fossil fuel petrochemical industry, my friend. It's a marketing ploy. Well, this memo was drafted or edited by someone named John Droz, also exposed at Desmog. Well, he's got a really interesting bio. Apparently, he retired at age 33 from savvy real estate investments, and then spent his retirement as an anti-wind advocate and also somebody advocating against restrictions on coastal development. He is or was a senior fellow at the ATI. The ATI was a think tank behind the lawsuit to obtain University of Virginia climatologist Michael Mann's ClimateGate emails. Now, the ATI stated that Droz was acting on his own, or that's what they told Desmog, but you can still see the patterns at play here. And a key quote from that Desmog expose on Droz is him saying, "Quite frankly, I never liked the looks of turbines." In fact, the way Droz chose to spend his retirement is so distressing to those in the know that Scientific American itself did an expose on him, and that's partially where Desmog cited to. So back to this leaked memo, if you want to call it that, it provides a whole blueprint that seems to have really been followed for anti-wind energy activism. From the PR strategy portion, they recommend a focused message along many channels with multiple voices. Target the identified audiences. Create a grassroots groundswell from which the clamor for change will reach the elected officials and policymakers. Well, my friend, this is key to change. Repeated messaging among multiple voices until it creates a clamor in the public. From its tactics section, work with other groups of common interest. And here it lists many of those groups cited by Desmog as having fossil fuel ties and promoting climate change denial, such as Heartland Institute, CFACT, and again, ALEC. Provide training to local leaders regarding PR. Identify and connect true environmentalists, property rights advocates, etc. Well, let me just pause on that one. When we say property rights advocates, well, whose rights are we talking about? That farmer I met who was telling me he got 80% of his power from his one single wind turbine and said, hey, he loves these things because you can still farm with wind turbines there, or all the neighbors, many of whom are not even farmers, clamoring to stop him from having it. Whose property rights? True environmentalists, well, that's another tactic. Call yourself green when you're not. Because that environmental movement from Audubon Society, which champions birds on down, champions responsibly sited wind energy. And local news media outlets do indeed buy into this framing. I have heard anti-wind advocates quoted as being environmentalists, while groups, activists, environmental organizations like Sierra Club or other advocates for clean and renewable power are ignored. Back to the memo. Provide local groups support materials like PowerPoint templates, high-quality professional brochures. And this is exactly what I have seen happen, and so have other environmental activists. When wind turbines are set to go in somewhere, at first there was community support, then along comes a group, SOS, with these beautiful brochures and all kinds of informations and social media campaigns, and now there's a clamoring against them. And the project gets stopped. Under national proposal, coordinate with signage, t-shirts, hats, bumper stickers, etc. Start a Get People Talking campaign. Use controversy to spark ideas. We've seen those images of like falling over turbines and that kind of thing. And a real wow, sponsorship for science fairs, school activity, etc. with preset parameters that cause students to steer away from wind because they discover it doesn't meet the criteria we set up. Ha ha ha. Wow, they discover that. But then who's calling who part of a big plot? Set up a dummy business that will go into communities considering wind development. Propose to build 400-foot billboards. Social media outreach. Seen that. Counterintelligence branch, a team to investigate links to any organization supporting wind in order to expose that support. Write expose book on the industry. And the takeaway is all of these strategies we have seen come to pass on a local level, national, and international. And the way I interpret this, and I hope you do too, is a tale of the reckless elements of the business community, especially those within the fossil fuel petrochemical industries, one of the most wealthiest, powerful industries on the face of the earth and has been for I don't know how long now, holding down an emerging industry. Nothing new there. And either way you look at it with these power sources, you're talking about spinning a turbine. You're either going to burn coal or natural gas, or you're going to fuel up a nuclear power plant to boil water and spin a turbine, or you're going to put a blade in the air, let the wind spin the turbine. And that dream of wind and so harnessing the wind and the sun goes back all the way to Nikola Tesla, as far as I can tell, if not earlier. Well, hey, I hope you found this video helpful, interesting, a little entertaining. If you did, please make sure you subscribe to my channel. You click that notification bell. You're liking, you're commenting, sincere constructive criticism appreciated, sincere comments. You're joining my 2 patrons at Patreon. Thank you, Belle LaGrucci and Environmental Coffee House, because this show takes a ton of work and comes at a major opportunity cost for me. Another economics term, meaning I'm not engaged in other activities that could be bringing in money. I'm doing this, what I believe is really important research and narratives to help us refocus our politics and thinking on the long-term survival of the species. And until next time, and as always, my friend, peace be with you.